What's going on, guys? Um, Finally posting again on YouTube. It really has been a while. I think I checked, and the last video was 5 years ago, which brings us back to 2020 during COVID. So, haven't really posted here in a while. Um, Not because I haven't had stuff that I could post about, just because there's been a lot of school stuff and then all of that going on in my life. So now that I'm finally graduated, I decided I might as well revive the YouTube channel and post a little bit more just because I enjoy doing that. And I can always just share some stuff with other people that will help out. And I would love to watch some stuff like this. So today I'm posting about player treatment and how I specifically do my player treatment. As you can see here on my screen, I have 3 different PNGs of Steph Curry, all in different lightings and different skin tones. So the main goal is just to show how I would go about adjusting these 3 images and making them all look cohesive and like they're all part of one bigger design, and make it all just seem like they're maybe in the same lighting, same arena, but overall just reduce some variability in the design and make everything look cohesive and like they're all together. So let's get started. Usually when I'm doing something like this, I like to start with the bigger image, the one that I think looks the best and is going to be the most prominent within the design. So in this case, I have 2 options. It's either the Curry in the back, which he's the biggest, but he's not in the front, so maybe not the focal point, or the Curry on the left, which is doing the MJ23 for when he passed Michael Jordan in most 40-point games. So basically, it's a decision you have to make whether you'd rather do the lighting like the one on the left or the one in the back. And looking at these photos, I'm leaning more towards the Steph in the back just because I like the contrast that it has going, darker shadows, good highlights, not as flat of an image as the one on the left or right. So ideally, I want to model everything kind of like the treatment that I do on the Steph on the back. And in order to figure out how I'm going to do that, first I start with this image, take it to Camera Raw, and typically in Camera Raw there's a couple adjustments that I like to do always. I like to mess with the clarity a little bit, give it some texture, some more depth, and then always play with the highlights, see whether you can get it so there's that perfect balance between shadows and highlights without it making seem too heavily edited. So something that I would do would probably look like this in this scenario. One thing with this image is that it is a little bit dull. I'm gonna convert this to a smart object first. But one thing is it's not as vibrant as maybe I'd want. So in order to fix this, I go to adjustment layers, go to selective color, clip that to the image, and then I just think about what skin tone or feel I'm trying to go for the graphic. So since the jerseys are all blue, I would typically go with a blue base on this design and build around that. So if I'm doing a blue design, I like to complement that more with the red skin tone rather than a yellowish skin tone or any other color. So usually I'll mess with the magenta sliders a little bit. Seems maybe a little bit too red, so add some yellow in there. Yeah, I'd say maybe something like this, just to, as you can see, it adds very subtle color, but it's not as monotone and black and white anymore. It doesn't look as dull. So now that I have this, I typically like to go put a curves layer. This curves layer is where I do my most severe and intense adjustments just to kind of get the entire feel of the picture. So for this one, I think this one would have this. Just make the highlights pop a little bit more, shadows go down a bit more. But I am noticing that maybe the red is a little bit too overpowering for something that would be a blue graphic. I'm just gonna go ahead and make the background a little dark blue just to kind of show what you might be working around. So since it is a little bit too red, to go back. It's a constant adjustment. It's not something like you set it and you move on and don't go back and touch. You always have to go back based on what you might have added later on, adjust what you could have done before to make sure that it all looks like it's all working together. So once I have the curves and some skin coloring, I like to go put some exposure. This is what I typically do to add my shadows, make them more harsh, and add like that depth that might be needed. So I'll make it really dark at first, and as you can see, it's covering all the highlights. Like this wouldn't look good even if I painted it on where I want it. So first I'll go ahead with painting it on so I can show you how I deal with that. So just make the darker shadows darker than they already are. Yeah. So again, this doesn't look great right now. Seems like it's taking away the highlights and very flat as an image, but I will address that in 1 second. So it's just a very rough outline of shadowing that I might do. This isn't typically as detailed as I would do it, but so if I have this, you open up blending options, and within blending options, there's this underlying layer setting, and you can use this underlying layer setting to adjust where the shadow or exposure layer will actually drop. So right now you can see the black shadow is on the highlighted area on the curry, like where the sweat is and where the light is hitting, and it doesn't really look good. So in order to combat that, you would go to here, hit the option key, and then slide this slider over, and you can see where the sweat is, it's starting to stop covering the white areas and allowing it to just stay in the darker areas. So this is how I adjust that exposure layer to make it so it only goes on the shaded areas. And now you can see it's just where the shadows would be, and it's not on the white areas anymore, which allows us to just paint wherever we want and it won't go on those highlighted areas. So say this is pretty good to start building around, but one more thing I might add is depending on where your light source is coming from in the image, if you were to add a light source from this direction in this image, kind of like this, you would want to make sure that all the other images have corrections and adjustments that also represent maybe the light source is coming from this way. So once again, add to that cohesive factor and make sure that everything just fits as is. So what I do, I copy these layers, clip them, I reset pretty much everything on the painted ones especially. So now we're working on this bottom right curry over here, and you can see his skin tones are way more harsh than the one up top, way darker, and the colors are just overpowering, don't look like they're the same thing. So in order to get rid of this, best way to combat large colors like this is in selective color to bring up the cyan a little bit, which will kind of dull the colors, and then you can undo anything that you had on the previous one when it comes to magenta and yellow. And then also a good rule of thumb is if you use this black, it can add that shadow that you might be needing or some more depth. But again, this is very vibrant, as I mentioned. So then I go into curves. I'll mess with the curves as I need to, and then see what looks best lighting wise. Obviously color wise not good, but then you go into blend modes. In order to make it more black and white, you put the luminosity rather than leave the normal curve on. And what this luminosity does is it kind of gets rid of the vibrance factor. It doesn't adjust the image in a color sense anymore. It leaves the colors untouched, as you can see here, it's his natural skin tone that was in the image before. So this is after the selective color, got rid of some of the reds, and then the curve filter, which adjusts that skin tone without adjust the skin highlights and shadows without messing with the color of the skin tone. So now you can see like it's sort of getting more similar. One thing I'm noticing is there's still a lot more yellow in his skin compared to the curry on top. So what I might do here is lower the yellow, lower the magenta, maybe make it a bit darker just to give it that feel. It still doesn't seem exactly accurate. You can always change selective color here and then change the yellows rather than, and this seems very similar now if you were to look at these two skin tones. So now this is when I go to my exposure layer. I leave my exposure layer the same. That's why I copy paste it from the previous image, because I want the shadows to be the same intensity. I don't want to have different shadows across images. So again, just paint over where you might want the shadows. So here, insides, this. So now this is starting to look a lot more like the image above. One thing I did forget to do was in camera raw, add the clarity. Oh, just did the last one. I go here, just add the clarity. Maybe add some more darkness, shadows. And yeah, hit okay. Yeah. So now it's starting to look a lot more similar to the previous one. I'm noticing that might be a little bit too vibrant still, but I don't want to mess with that too much right now. That's something you can always go back and adjust with other layers. But you can see now, just these 3 layers that I added kind of help match that skin tone, match the same shadow pattern, just make it seem like it's all more cohesive. And now we get to the third curry. This one could be a little bit more tough. This one seems like a flatter image. The light's not as harsh on it. So in order to deal with this one, seems like the reds are basically non-existent in the skin. So you start with the yellows here because there's no skin tone to adjust for reds. Why isn't this all? It's clipped to the wrong layer. It's not moving, but so go here. Have the yellows going. Too yellow. There we go. Now you can see it's slowly starting to look more and more like the other 2 images. Cool. So the base skin tone is a little bit too much of everything, honestly. Very vibrant. And then combat that with some cyan. Starts to look similar. Now here, I'll do the curves on luminosity. Adjust this with other colors. The highlights on the other 2 are way more harsh than this one, so I would have to have harsh curves adjustments in order to make them match up a little bit better. So like here, this seems like similar enough. And then same with the exposure, just keep it like this, this. Just match that up. But now you can see, so we have this one, and this one's more dull. The other 2, skin tone wise. You can always add another selective color layer on top as like a final adjustment, and then just adjust, like add some magenta here. And maybe if it's too bright, always add a levels layer. use this levels layer to adjust overall, just highlights, skin tones, all that. And I'm noticing that the exposure might be a little bit too harsh, so you can always soften it up with the brush. But yeah, so you have these three images now. If you want to see before and after, they look similar now. Before, they looked like this. Very different, but I was able to give the minor adjustments to the back one, make this one match as best as I can, and then make this one match as best as I can. And now having these three, it's easier to build around knowing you have images that look the same, and these could all be from the same game now. So knowing this information, you can build your design however you want it, and this isn't the finished product when it comes to the image treatment, but this is typically how I start my designs, just to make sure that when I am going through it, I can fully visualize how everything could look as a final product. And then on top of this, you'd still have your color corrections. If you're adding any elements into the design, you'd have to build around that with the lighting and make sure that the lighting matches the players. Always adding shadows, other design aspects and elements on top of the players. But overall, this is how I do player treatment, and I think player treatment is very important to have all the images look like they belong within the same game or same graphic, less variability, and just something that doesn't really get noticed is better in this case, where nobody's gonna look at these images and be like, oh wow, like it's really good player treatment. They're just gonna think these images are all from the same game, not acknowledge it. But that's better than somebody pointing out all three images have different lighting, look different, different skin tones, and it becomes a distraction. So yeah, that's all I have today. I'm looking forward to making more videos in the future. So if you guys have any suggestions of what you want to see, you want to see any cool challenges, anything fun, let me know in the comments. I need some ideas, but I do want to post more, so let me know. And thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something out of this, and have a great weekend.